In this video we'll be looking at using triggers, and basically when a certain conditions occur, like a cell's been updated or something, using that to actually trigger a macro and do something and respond to the user. One place you might use something like this is if a user enters a piece of data or something like that, one of their cells changes, you might run a quick macro to check whether data is a positive or a negative value and update the colors of cells accordingly, for example. Now look at how we can make some macros run automatically. Now we might have some numbers like this. So a whole series of numbers, positive and negative numbers. And say we'd written a macro, like this one here, that basically iterates through those numbers in our column 1, checks if they're greater than 0. If they're greater than 0, it makes them black. This is what this value will be. If they're not greater than 0, it makes them red. So negative numbers will be highlighted in red. So if we run that little macro there, we see that negative numbers are highlighted in red and all the positive numbers are in black there. So there's a pretty clear differentiation between them. But say we added a few more numbers. Well, it hasn't highlighted them for us. There's been some sort of pattern that Excel has detected there, and it's gone highlighting them red and black alternately, because that's what we had last. Then we need to hit our macro again, and it will do it again for us. What about if we want, instead of having to go to our macro and hit the macro, or pressing the control whatever key we need to actually run the macro, what if we could run this automatically? Well, if we want to run it automatically so that we don't have to keep hitting the macro manually, what we need to do is create a trigger for this, something that triggers the macro when the worksheet actually changes itself. So the way we do this, we don't do them in our normal place where we've been writing our macros in the module area here. This is what we'll be calling. We write them in our sheet area. So this will be specific to a particular sheet or even a workbook. But we're interested in sheet 1, so let's write this for sheet 1. So the way we write it, we say private sub worksheet change. So this is the thing that we're interested in. How are we going to reference what's been changed if we're interested in that? So we can reference what's been changed, and if it falls within a certain range, we can do something about it. But here, I'm just going to do it so that if the worksheets change, we actually do something about it. And then we want to call our macro. We call that macro 1, so we just write in there macro 1. So there we go. Now if we change something in here, so I'll change that to -6, it runs the macro and changes it. It'll also change it if I type anything else anywhere else in the worksheet, even though it might not affect it. So we'll change this one to 0 because it's less than, or it's not greater than 0, it's changed. -4, and any other changes in the workbook will be recorded as well. I'll put a gap in there. Now that hasn't iterated over that section yet because it's stopped at this point here. If we put something in there, it'll change it too. So that's how we can have some triggers occurring on a particular worksheet based on a change actually occurring in the worksheet, a user changing something and changing some data. We can very easily run a macro and make it fix things up or do things and respond to the user's changes while they're doing it. We just won't want to make those macros too large, otherwise it may degrade user performance and slow things down a bit.